Once upon a time, there were fields of green covering rolling hills, and sheep lived on these hills. Birds sang in the trees, and the sun shone down from a glorious blue sky as a nearby stream gurgled fresh, clear water, earthly deliciousness to taste. The days were warm and the nights were pleasant. The lambs frolicked on the soft grass. Then, one evening, something happened. The sheep saw flashing lights on the horizon against the evening sky, way past the distant trees. The sheep were curious. On the next day, they set out to see what was going on with those flashing lights beyond the distant trees. It was a long trek, far past their familiar surroundings. As they walked, the grass turned from green to mostly brown, interspersed with dry packed earth and rocky ground. The trees started looking parched and emaciated, and the sky was hazy. The crystal blue was fading into yellow. Some of the sheep asked why they were leaving the beautiful rolling hills for this, but others responded, "Because we want to see what is out there. We're curious." It seemed that they were walking for days, and their bellies were screaming for sustenance while the sun beat down on them. By early evening, they finally arrived to find a great big billboard with flashing neon lights, so bright that it hurt their sheep eyes to even look in that direction. This billboard was what they saw flashing in the distance, and it read, "Free delicious food. You don't have to graze for it, and you don't have to eat it off the ground like animals." While a few of the sheep were skeptical at first, saying, "Why do we need free food when we have plenty back where we came from?" Others immediately saw how great this is. "Because we're here, and we're hungry, and you don't have to graze for the food, and you don't have to eat it off the ground, dummy." A few famished sheep rushed over to the trough and started gobbling away, eating way more than they normally would. Their elbows were out, because it was free, and they each wanted to get as much free food as they could before it was gone. The food didn't run out, though. It was replenished by these friendly host sheep that tended to the troughs. There was something odd about the host sheep, though, and it was slightly off-putting. Not to be ungrateful, but the guest sheep noticed that the friendly host sheep appeared to have something wrong with them. The skin on their faces and the wool on their backs, it all fit kind of funny. To top it off, they had big bushy tails wagging out and back from underneath their wool. Huh, the traveling sheep thought. Must be a new variety of sheep. But they were friendly, and the food kept coming. What kind sheep? The next day, in addition to keeping them fed, the friendly, fluffy-tailed sheep started building what appeared to be a fence, just one section. With all the effort going into the fence, the other sheep understood why the food wasn't quite as tasty the next day. But hey, it was free, and they didn't have to eat it off the ground like animals. They were so lucky. On top of that, there were now television sets at the feeding troughs, so the sheep didn't have to be bored while they were eating. It featured happy programming about happy sheep that lived on a happy farm in a happy pen, and how lucky they were because it was so dangerous outside the pen. And the sheep, they loved the programming about happy families and happy suburban lives with sidewalks and picket fences. While this was going on, the friendly sheep completed more and more sections of fencing, which was starting to encircle the flock and the big flashing neon sign. Some of the sheep said, "Hey, they're building a fence around us." But the friendly sheep told him it was there for their protection, and this made sense to them. Over time, the food continued to get worse, but the sheep understood that it took the friendly sheep so much effort to build a fence to protect them that they didn't have much time for gourmet meals. Besides, many of the sheep were becoming fat, eating too much anyway, so the others started making fun of them for being such hogs. But the friendly sheep thought of everything. Every once in a while, one of the bigger guest sheep would disappear. Nobody knew what happened to it, but the others were glad because the bigger ones were embarrassing to the rest of the flock with their gluttony. Maybe they sent them to a special fitness boot camp. The friendly sheep thought of everything and were doing everything they could to boost morale. The food continued to get even worse, and some within the flock started murmuring about it. So the friendly sheep introduced other conveniences to make the sheep's lives even better, like wool salons, to make the sheep more attractive with fancy wool cuts and colorful dyes to make sheep eyes really pop. There were also special perfumes to help the sheep not smell like sheep anymore. One of the new favorite conveniences was laser wool removal to address unwanted wool growth in hard to reach places. It was wonderful, and the sheep were completely captivated by these new conveniences. And lordy, lordy, the fence was finally finished. They were safe at last. Hallelujah! Blessing upon blessings, Sour Ned, the sheep that kept griping to anyone who would listen about his discolored, swollen ankles, was finally disappeared. What took the friendly sheep so long? Peace and quiet, thank the Lord! Things were great in the pen with modern sheep life humming along, but things were soon to get even better. Way better. Better than anyone ever expected. The friendly sheep gave each of them cell phones, followed soon by sheep social media. Now they could each keep track of one another, learn about new friendly sheep products being peddled by some of the guest sheep, which were called influencer sheep. As a bonus, sheep social media provided a helpful platform for judging one another, which, let's be honest, is a whole lot of fun. As the influencers told them, this new media helped keep the sheep connected to one another, which they desperately needed for their mental health, but without the awkwardness of speaking directly to the sheep crowded right next to them in the pen. Even in the best of circumstances, however, there are always detractors. Some of the sheep suspected that this sheep social media only made them miserable. What a bunch of whiners. This evolution of sheep life goes on for generation after generation, with the guest sheep increasingly reliant upon the friendly sheep, thinking their lives are better for every innovation, while a dark corner of their minds questioned whether this was actually true. One day, a lamb known as John comes along, and this lamb is, from birth, eccentric. He tries to fit in at first. He tries to be a good lamb and be like the other lambs, but for some reason, he just can't manage it. Everything he does is just out of step with popular lambs in the flock. The popular lambs are a bit merciless with him, calling him names he doesn't even understand, like lamb chop. What does that even mean? He thought. Slowly, he matures, enduring sheep life as long as he can, but finally he decides he can't do it anymore. He'll never fit in, and he doesn't want to. He sees the world more clearly for what it is, and he sees what is going on. He sees how deceptive the friendly sheep are, and how they have trapped the flock with their lies. Being an especially stubborn and independent thinking sheep, he says, "No, I'm not giving in. They don't get me. They don't get to be in my mind. I'm going to pass on all of those things the captors provide to us." The other sheep were shocked to hear him refer to the friendly sheep as captors. John goes to the edge of the pen, where he subsists on stubs of grass that pop up and unfortunate fat bugs crawling around. He noses down into the mud to sip whatever water he can from the tiny little stream that barely edges through the pen. His wool grows out in a full, shaggy coat, with bits of grass and dirt clinging to it, and he smells like sheep, which is not cool when the more popular sheep smell like lilac-infused body spray. The other sheep look across the pen and make fun of him because he is so uncultured, but he doesn't care. He won't submit again. Not now, not ever. Separation from the flock has only reinforced in his mind the dangers of fitting in, the dangers of those things distracting sheep from living meaningful lives. He reflects on how those things affect him and others, causing him to think and do things of which he has not been proud. And he repents to God for his old ways of wantonly giving in to the trappings of his captors. Then, while doing all of this, John realizes something as he's getting older. He's happier than he's been in years, maybe ever. It's like a burden has been lifted off of his shoulders. Time passes and pen life continues. Then one day, another sheep, a big black sheep named Myrna, was having a particularly rough day. She had just been ghosted again on one of the sheep dating apps once they realized how big she was. She'd so desperately wanted to be a dainty little ewe with big fake eyelashes, like the other more popular ewes. But that just wasn't who she was. She was good and sturdy, healthy stock, and that wasn't cool, apparently. She was sad and felt, somewhat ironically, small. In her sadness, she looked over across the pen at John, rolling around in the dirt and talking to and laughing with himself. And in that moment, she was taken by how unburdened he looked. Unburdened, she thought. Oh, to be unburdened. It took courage for her to first venture over and talk with John, because other sheep will talk. They'll point fingers at her and associate her with John the weirdo. But at that moment, she didn't care. I'd rather be a happy weirdo like him than live like this, she thought. So she set out to talk with John. And from the moment they struck up a conversation, she liked John. He was zealous in his rejection of the ways of the pen, but kind at heart, and he was unburdened, happy to share with Myrna his wisdom about how he became unburdened, while all of the other sheep seemed downtrodden and troubled. So John shares his secret, which wasn't actually a secret. It is about letting go of these worldly things which hold us down. He talked to her about traveling into the wilderness, so to speak, and repenting to God for things she may have done to harm her fellow sheep and thus separate her from God. And then he does something Myrna did not expect. He takes a little water from the tiny stream and uses it to wet her head as a sign of her commitment and resolution to this new way of living. She felt so special in that moment, a turning from the past. Soon other sheep noticed them talking and laughing, and more sheep ventured to the lonely edge of the pen to see what all the hubbub is about with this one stubborn and independent sheep named John. And John develops a following, disciple sheep committed to this new way of living an unburdened life in the pen. While all of this is going on, a new sheep emerges amongst the regular flock. He goes by the name Jesus, and he is a day laborer from the other side of the creek, in the most God-forsaken portion of the pen. It turns out he's John's cousin and shares John's penchant to see the world from a different perspective. But even from the time he was only a lamb, people can see that Jesus is different, even from John. He seems to be infused with something special, as if God's light illuminates everything about him. Being a free thinker and a fearless soul, it was inevitable that Jesus would one day venture over to visit John in the wilderness of the pen, to see what John is up to. And when he does, it is as if John is starstruck by this cousin of his, able to see God's light shining from his soul. Jesus, for his part, is excited by the good work John is doing, of helping other sheep unburden themselves from the life-robbing, predatory ways of the pen. He's so excited, as it turns out, that he wants to affirm John's ministry by submitting to it and the baptismal commitment embodied therein. John is reluctant at first, insisting that if anyone should be baptized, it should be Jesus, baptizing John, not the other way around. But Jesus insists on being baptized, and it is done. As John sensed, however, Jesus is no ordinary sheep. Whereas John saw the error of the ways of the pen and the damage such living inflicts on the lives of the sheep, Jesus saw a life outside of the pen, a life of green pastures on rolling hills, of a life marked not by cruelty and oppression, but of kindness and compassion. He talks about a new way of living, a way of transforming life through forgiveness and grace. It is a way of living with love at the core of our being, and he tells the sheep, I can lead you to green pastures. As he's talking, others see that he starts transcending his limitations from that of a sheep to that of a shepherd in amongst them, sent to show them the way out of the pen. To follow me, he told them, you have to give up on the trappings to which you've been accustomed, as John had prepared the way. You have to want something new and have new eyes to envision a life lived by love and love alone. His message sweeps across the pen like a wave, at least for some of the sheep. Soon enough, Jesus even captures the attention of the host sheep, the captors running the whole operation. They notice the sheep behaving in very unsheep-like ways, starting to think for themselves, and they realize how dangerous this is to the order of the pen. They start looking for ways to disrupt Jesus and his threat to the well-established and profitable social order. Many other sheep balk at the foolish pipe dreams served up by Jesus. This is all there is, they say, and they barely even look up as they continue to consume the slop laid out before them, checking their cell phones for the latest feeds on their sheep social media. It isn't that they are bad sheep, they just don't have eyes to see yet. In spite of the host sheep intentions and the disinterest of many sheep, many others were captivated by Jesus and his visions of life as it could be. Jesus would tell them, I am the way, the truth, and the life. There is only one way out of the pen, but I can show you the way. I am the gate. It is the path of love. Some of the sheep were afraid. The wolves, as some of the sheep were starting to see their host sheep, were so scary, and food, though not good, was at least available. And so many things could go wrong if we leave the pen. You have nothing to fear, Jesus said, for I am your shepherd, and I will protect you with my life. But even in death, I will never abandon you, because love is transcendent. It cannot be denied. It cannot be killed. It will never fail. Put your worries to rest, for I am with you always. And that is what happened. Jesus led them out of the pen, but as they left, they realized that the fence was never there, or at least not in a way that restrained them. They had been free to come and go as they pleased the whole time, had they only had eyes to see it. There was never cause for fear, for love had always been with them. They only needed their shepherd to show them the way, and the courage and humility to follow. Life can seem so hard at times, with everything seemingly out of our control. We want to escape so badly. We want to be shown the way outside of life's traps in which we find ourselves, past the walls and fences that hold us in place. But the reality is surreal, because Jesus shows us freedom here and now. Not a freedom from life's challenges or freedom to control our world, but a freedom to let go, to transcend the boundaries that hold us in place, a freedom to give our lives over to God, the God of love, a freedom to live and love with abandon, a freedom to be our authentic selves with God's light at our center, no matter life's circumstances. And with this freedom, we find peace. Jesus tells us, follow me. I will show you the way out of this pen. I will lead you on paths of abundance where you can graze. Stay close to me and I will protect you, even to the end of my life and beyond into eternity. We place our faith in Jesus, in God alone, knowing full well that there are no guarantees with our lives. But just as with Jesus, life is not ending. All is well with our souls. My parents had a friend named Dick Piper, who knew me most of my life. Once I became an adult and started a family of my own, Dick and I became good friends, sharing a common interest in learning about and studying Christianity. What I loved most about Dick, however, was that he was fearless in asking challenging questions about the faith and questioning things that didn't make sense to him. A former Methodist pastor, he wasn't afraid to rock the boat, and we spent much time together in both deep conversation and laughter. Toward the end of his life, we continued to share books written by Christian troublemakers, and we even taught a few adult education classes together. I was sad when he entered hospice, knowing that our time of troublemaking was coming to an end. Then one day, his daughter Linda called to tell me that Dick requested that I stop by and see him in hospice. The doctors thought the end was near. I felt honored to be invited to share in that sacred time with him and his family. Linda and Gail, another daughter, were there when I arrived. It was a warm day, and he was wearing nothing but some sort of diaper-looking thing. Me seeing him in that way didn't seem to bother him in the least. I loved that. He reminded me of Captain Underpants from the children's books, a big cherub, the image oddly bookending his life from the infancy where we all began. I mentioned to Dick that he wasn't giving his wife Carol much of a head start in the afterlife. Carol had passed just a month prior to that point. My words just came out of my mouth, and I was concerned that I might have been insensitive, as Lisa, my wife, reminds me I usually am. But Linda laughed, for which I was grateful. Dick was used to me and didn't react. Having read that it is common for people near death to experience the presence of previously deceased loved ones, I asked him about Carol, if she was there, and he pointed to an empty place in the room. She's right there, he said, waiting patiently with him. I loved that. I asked him if he was afraid of dying. No, he said. I'm curious as to what comes next. It is like that old song, he said, all is well with my soul. There is nothing to fear. There never was. God is with you. Live your life in love.